Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hope everyone had a great week. Okay, so I am going to share something in the chat box here quick for all of you. So if you take a moment, you can download it, and it will be our speaker's slides today. So you can have it open or save it for later. Let me just find that really quick. Okay, there we go. So it's popped in the chat for everyone. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So good morning. My name is Megan Jacobson, and I am the SDSU Extension Nutrition Field Specialist. We're excited to have you join us for this is our week 3 of our August virtual self-care series. So last week I was on and talked about how to get your veggies on the go with some ideas for picking, prepping, and packing. So if you missed last week's presentation, you can get a recording of that. So if you're signed up for these sessions, you should have received that link. But if you did not, please let me know in chat or by email. So for today, Amber Letcher is on with us, and she will be discussing how to understand and manage emotions. So before I introduce Amber, we would love to get to know a little bit about everyone who is joining us this morning. So if you take some time and put your name in the chat box, along with share any emotions that you've already experienced this morning. So your name and any emotions that you've experienced yet this morning. Okay, so I'm really happy to introduce Amber. So Amber is the 4-H Youth Development Specialist with SDSU Extension. She's based on the Brookings campus. And Amber works with youth and families in South Dakota by providing programming and resources that promote health and wellness with a special emphasis on rural communities. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. But without further ado, I'm going to send it back to Amber to go ahead and get started with today's topic. So Amber, take it away.
Thank you so much, Megan. Welcome, everyone. It's exciting to see so many people on this Friday morning. We're going to talk a little bit about emotions today and how they can influence how we act. They can influence how we even experience our day and how we interact with others. So we'll learn a little bit more about emotions and then also get some strategies for how to manage those emotions for success. Sometimes we tend to talk about emotion regulation, emotion awareness with children. We really make an emphasis on helping them learn how to recognize emotion, whether it's on facial expressions. But this is something that really takes some learning throughout life. So we don't just automatically become really good at regulating our emotions or understanding them even without a little bit of conscious effort. So we'll go through a few things today, and I hope you learn some strategies that are helpful to you. Megan did share that handout again in the chat box if you've just joined us. So it's the slides to this presentation in case you want to follow along or use it later on too. Okay, so what exactly is an emotion? You probably have labels for emotions, you know what they are, but a general definition is that they are a state that involves 3 main components. So there's an emotional experience, there's a physiological response, how your body feels when you're experiencing that emotion, and then there's also a behavioral or an expressive response. So emotional experience, naming that emotion, what exactly is it? And we have a range of emotion. We know that the same situation, you might be feeling multiple emotions, or even the same situation, you might experience different emotions given the time, or what else is going on in your environment. And you've probably also noticed that sometimes you don't even have quite the language to really express what you're feeling. So maybe I know that I'm feeling upset, but it's a little more than that, or I can't quite put my finger on it. So emotions can be really complex, even when we're trying to consciously describe them. The physiological response, like I mentioned, is how your body feels. So maybe when you are experiencing anxiety, maybe your hands sweat, or maybe your heart pounds a little bit. It's your body's way of signaling something is going on. I'm feeling something. I'm not in a state of just equilibrium or homeostasis. So we have those physical indicators as well. And then depending on how you're feeling, there's a response, there's an expression. How would people know that you are feeling happy or feeling overwhelmed? There are signals that we put out into the world that help others understand how we're feeling. And it's just a general reaction to our own emotion. So if you think about this a little bit more specifically, so I'll ask you to imagine that you have been asked to give an important speech in front of a large group of people. And we'll say this is a face-to-face meeting presentation, and you are the main attraction, you are the speaker. So if you think about that, put yourself in that situation. What are some emotions that you might feel? Or maybe you've done this before and you remember the emotions you felt. Feel free to type some of those in the chat box. What emotions might you go through if you're going to speak to a large group, a public speaking event? Scared, nervous, a lot of anxiety. Yeah, public speaking tends to bring out some of those emotions in a lot of people. Yes, heart racing, sweatiness, shakiness, right? Just some feelings of anxiety. Now, some people get really energized by this. They might be in the minority, but we can experience a range of emotions. So that is your emotional experience. There's a uniqueness to the situation, and maybe you have a similar situation that you can fall back on and you remember those feelings. Sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it just makes you more anxious, but you experience that event. How might your body react? Now, we had a couple in here already, that physiological response, the heart racing, the sweatiness, maybe a little shaking, right? It's your body's response to this emotion that you're feeling. Sometimes I'll get even a headache if I'm stressed, or I just have some strong emotion, anxiety. What about behaviors? How would people know that you are maybe a little bit anxious? How might you express that anxiety, even if you didn't mean to? Can you think of anything that you might see? Or maybe you've seen a speaker in public and you think, oh, that they look a little bit nervous, I can tell. Giggling, yeah, you don't mean to, but it's a way to maybe comfort yourself. Maybe some more facial expressions, a worried look on their face, maybe some stuttering, fidgeting. Yes, definitely. Those are all behavioral responses to that anxiety. Shaky voice, yep. Sometimes we'll talk more quickly when we're anxious. So maybe you practiced your presentation, it was an hour, but when you actually do it, it's only 45 minutes, right? Because we're just a little bit anxious and it throws us off just a little bit. So knowing some of this, understanding I'm feeling anxiety, this is how my body is reacting, and this is maybe how I'm showing some of that anxiety. Just having an awareness of that puts us in a good position to actually control or manage some of those emotions. So always a good idea to think about these three components. It's not just I'm feeling happy, but why and how am I expressing it? The other thing I want to draw your attention to is that for the most part, we have the capacity to experience a range of emotions, anger, happiness, sadness, whatever that might be. But our expressions of those emotions can be different based on us as individuals. And so one of my favorite examples of this, I'll share a quick story, came from a professor that I had a long time ago. And so he told this story about how he had relocated for his first job, and he just moved to a different part of the US from where he grew up. And just to relax a little bit, he decided to go to a movie. When the movie started, the picture was on the screen, but there was no sound to the video. So imagine you are in a theater, lots of people, you're watching a movie, and there's no sound. What emotion might you have in that situation? How do you think you would feel? No sound, you're expecting it. What are some of those emotions? Upset, right? I spent money. I want to get the full experience. Some confusion, frustration. Yes, definitely. Yep, more confusion. And for the most part, that seemed to be what happened in that theater. Confusion, frustration, what's going on? What would be your behavioral response? What would you do in that situation? You might just kind of sit there and wait. They'll fix it, right? Maybe look around. Does anyone else seem to know what's going on? Maybe there's some movement, right? Some physical indicators of being upset. Maybe go tell someone. Yes. So all of your reactions were for the most part very similar to what happened in that theater. People looked around, they talked to whoever else they were with in the theater. There were looks of confusion. Someone did get up and go out, presumably to tell an employee that it wasn't working. That was not the response, the behavioral response of my professor. So he experienced frustration, he was confused, but his response and his expression was to just sort of start screaming to the room. Right? I can't hear. There's no sound. He's, really loud, just out, to no one in particular. And he kind of, stomped his feet and made some gestures. But he was the only one. He was the only one doing that. And the other people in the room looked at him in confusion, and he looked at them in confusion because, where he came from, the culture was just to be a little bit more vocal with your frustration. And so he said, had I been in a theater in my hometown and this happened, the whole place would be, screaming out in their frustration, but that was not what happened here. So they experienced the same emotion, but it was a very different response. So that's good to know too, right? That yes, we have a common language for some of these emotions, but our reactions to them can be a little bit different. So we want to understand our own emotions. We want to understand the emotions of others. So if that ever happens to you, think about what's going on. Watch the reactions of other people in your room. And the reason we want to know a little bit more about our emotions is that they do influence our decision making. So in those moments where you have very elevated emotionality, it can sometimes feel out of control. So obviously we don't want our emotions to be at 100% all the time where we're always really activated. We also don't want our emotions to be basically empty, where we're more numb and we just don't feel anything. That's not ideal either. We want to fall somewhere in the middle, right? A range of emotions that goes up and down in that middle area. That sounds great, but how do we do that? Can we really control those emotions? And when you're at a very elevated state, it's really common to feel like these emotions are acting on me. I am the passive recipient of them. They're automatic. I'm going to give a public speech, and obviously I'm going to be nervous. I can't control that. But more and more studies show us that we do have a little bit of control over this. A recent study from Stanford showed that when people consciously tried to control, for example, some of that anxiety, if they wanted to remain calm and they really actively tried to remain calm, they could do so. And you're probably also experienced a time where you really fed off of someone else's emotions. They were upset and you started talking to them, and suddenly you were also very upset, right? So we feed off of that energy, which indicates some control over these emotions. And that's a good thing, as long as we're consciously aware of how we can manage those emotions. So I'll give you a few steps here. If you are feeling kind of at the top with those negative emotions, a good tool to use is these simple questions that you can ask yourself. What's my feeling right now? What is the emotion I'm experiencing? Maybe I'm disappointed. Okay, why? Why are you feeling that way? What happened in your environment? Maybe I'm disappointed because a good friend canceled plans with me unexpectedly, and I'm worried she's mad at me, upset with me for something. The next step is to do some perspective taking. Could there be an alternate explanation? Is there a different underlying reason for why you're actually feeling this way? Is it truly just this interaction with your friend? So think about what else is going on in your environment. What do you want to do with that emotion? What's your instinct? Maybe your instinct is to, I'm disappointed, I'm upset, I'm going to send an angry text, right? And let her know that I'm upset. Is that the best response? Probably not. So whatever it is, whatever that response is that you want to give, get it out there, think about it, and then finally you're going to pick the best way to handle it. So I could send her that message, or maybe I could just wait a little bit and see if there was, something more pressing that came up, and it has nothing to do with our relationship. So use these steps anytime you're feeling some of those high emotions. And the benefit to this is that we're going to start to develop a higher emotional intelligence, your EQ, which is really your understanding of your own emotions, as well as how they might impact the emotions of others. So again, emotions are not passive. We feed off of each other's energy. And so if we're good at reading the room, at also evaluating our environment, we tend to have better communication, we have better relationships. And also, to me, we really enhance our feelings of empathy, which can be very important. Doing that perspective taking and trying to really understand others as well as ourselves. And you'll notice that as your emotional intelligence increases, you get much better at practicing what we call emotional display rules. So this is basically your ability to sense your own emotions and then provide a more appropriate expression of those emotions given your situation. So for example, the first one is amplification. Hard for me to say this morning. And that means that you maybe are feeling some happiness. Maybe a friend got really good news and they are super excited. They are just over the moon, over the top. And while you're happy, you know that just being happy or just saying great job is not what they need in that moment, right? You need to match their energy. You're elated now as well. And so we're exaggerating that real emotion, and that's helpful to the friend that we're working with. At the same time, maybe there might be a situation where you need to downplay your emotion. Maybe you're the elated one. You're super, super happy. Someone else is not in that space. And so you just want to take it down a notch to help them out. In other situations, we don't want to show any emotion. Maybe you are with a group where there can be some conflict or some controversial ideas, and it's maybe better to keep that poker face and not let what you're feeling at the moment out. And then finally, sometimes it's more appropriate for us to truly hide or mask an emotion. If we're upset, but in the environment at that time, it's better for us to maybe put on a happy face just for that moment. So you'll see yourself using some of these likely, and that's an indicator of your emotional intelligence. And it's good for relationship building as well. So I have here some general tips for how you can manage some of your emotions. And then I'm going to talk about some emotion specific tips for you. So I won't go through all of these because I'm sure you get a general sense. The one you might not be as familiar with is the mood journal. So if you're not big on writing in a journal, but maybe you're more creative, a mood journal is simply taking a piece of paper or a page in a book and coloring in that page based on how you're feeling either that day or in that moment. So if you're, feeling really happy and excited, you're going to color that page in with bright colors and in yellows and, all that sort of thing. And if you're not feeling so great, maybe your color palette is a little bit darker, but it's a good way for you to evaluate some of your emotions and maybe track some of those emotions. So feel free to go through those. A lot of the exercises on there we have talked about in previous self-care videos. So go back and review some of those. But if we're talking about specific feelings and what you can do, let's say that you're feeling anxious. The good thing to do here is to really take a time out, give yourself a breather and some space. So maybe you want to, just count to 10 really slowly or count down from 10 really slowly. Removing yourself from a situation and just taking some time. Maybe you're going to do some yoga, some stretching. Again, all activities that we've talked about before, but give yourself a chance to calm a little bit. And the other thing you can do is limit alcohol or caffeine intake, because those are going to have a bodily response. And if you're already anxious, these could just elevate that. If instead you're feeling some sadness, sadness is a little bit more tricky. Sometimes your sadness will manifest itself as something else. Maybe you seem more angry, or maybe you seem to have more guilt, but really the underlying emotion is sadness. It's a little bit harder to identify, but if you do feel that way and you recognize some sadness, a good thing to do is talk to someone you can trust, a friend, get those emotions out, let people know, or even a licensed professional. This is a good time to talk to someone who can help you build some skills to get over that sadness. Finding a creative outlet, again, expressing some of that emotion, getting it out, and then finding something that you enjoy. Sometimes when we're really sad, we might even forget, what do I enjoy? So even thinking back to something previously that's happened that has brought you joy in the past, and doing that might be a strategy to get you out of that cycle of sadness. If you're feeling overwhelmed, you can try some grounding activities, mindfulness activities. Really simple one is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So bringing focus to that present moment. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 that you can smell, and then 1 that you can taste. The tricky one there is the taste, because we don't always have food or drink available. Even if you have nothing, you can taste the inside of your mouth, right? What's in there? So that's an option. If you have an overwhelmed mind, cleaning your physical space can help. So just tidy up a little bit, get some of that chaos out. That can be helpful. And then making a to-do list. Keep it short. If you're overwhelmed, you're going to want to write a really long to-do list, which is going to make you feel even more overwhelmed. So keep it short and then finish one thing. And then finally, if you're feeling stressed, which is usually more of a physical response, you have some body response to that, you can feel that stress. Trying the 4 A's of stress management. I won't go through them, but you can read them there. Ultimately, it comes down to, removing yourself from a situation, trying to change some of it. And if you can't, ultimately accepting that, accept what you can't change, and attempt to move on from it. Moving around is a great option, dancing, right? Take the stairs, and then looking at maybe some of your time management strategies. Sometimes we're stressed because we get focused on perfection. So see if that might be hindering some of your progress. Okay, with our last few minutes today, I want you to actually use an emotion-based activity. So you're going to choose your emotion. How are you feeling today? And I'll give you some activities to actually do. So if you're feeling some anxiety, you're going to do a 2-minute body scan. If you're not familiar with that, basically you're focusing your attention on different parts of your body progressively. Start at your feet and then move up, calves, thighs, all the way up to the top of your head. If you're feeling some sadness, I want you to make a list of things that you enjoy and then pick one of those to do this weekend. If you're feeling overwhelmed, we're going to take 2 minutes to just clean up the space around you or reorganize it to be more efficient. And then if you're feeling stressed, turn on some music, dance around, cameras on or cameras off, your choice. And then we talked a lot about negative emotions, but people said they were happy and excited, and that's wonderful too. So spread some of that around. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to write a thank you note or send a happy text to a few people. We have a few minutes. I'm going to set my timer. You pick your emotion, you pick your activity, and then we will come back for the remainder of the session. So, all right, go ahead and get started. Okay, we'll come back. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of time to practice one of these strategies. And if not, use them later as you're feeling some of these emotions. I'm going to wrap up here. Just want to say thank you to everyone. Also acknowledge my graduate student who also helped me with this presentation. And I'm happy to take questions if you have them, but otherwise have a wonderful Friday.
Yes, thank you so much, Amber. And thank you everyone again for joining us. What a wonderful presentation. Lots of great practical tips were shared. And also for those of you who joined throughout today's session, I did re-upload Amber's presentation slides. They are the attachment called Wellness and Emotions. So please take some time before you jump off, if you haven't already, to click that, download it, and save it. So you can have all of those great relaxation tips and understanding your emotions. I know I really enjoyed all of the things that Amber shared today. So like Amber said, we wish you all a wonderful weekend and have a great rest of your Friday. And join us for our next self-care session next week. We hope to see you all there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Yes.